Think about the cash in your wallet right now. You trust it. You work for it. You build your entire life around it. But what if the government that printed it simply ceased to exist? Not weakened, not reformed, gone. And yet somehow the money kept working. That's not fiction. That has happened multiple times across multiple continents. And the lessons buried inside those stories are more relevant to your financial life today than anything your bank will ever tell you. Here's the question nobody in mainstream finance wants you to ask. If the most powerful governments in human history couldn't protect the value of their own currency, what makes you so certain yours is different? We're not talking about inflation. We're not talking about recession. We're talking about the complete and total collapse of a governing power and what happened to the money after the empire fell. Because here's what the history books skip over. When governments collapse, most people assume the money dies with them. They picture wheelbarrows of worthless paper. They picture Zimbabwe. They picture chaos. But 5 times in recorded history, something completely different happened. The government vanished. The army disbanded, the borders dissolved, the leaders fled or were executed, and the currency, it kept circulating, it kept holding value. In some cases, it became more trusted after the government that issued it was gone. Why? How? And what does that tell us about the fragile system we're all living inside right now? That's exactly what we're going to unpack, one forgotten currency at a time. And by the end of this video, you will never look at the money in your pocket the same way again. Let's start with a currency so trusted that even its enemies refuse to stop using it. The first forgotten currency takes us to the Eastern Mediterranean, roughly 300 BC. The Greek city-state of Alexandria had just begun minting a silver coin called the Ptolemaic tetradrach. It was heavy, precisely weighted, stamped with the face of a ruler who projected absolute authority. And it was trusted, not because people loved the government, but because the coin itself was reliable. Same weight, same silver content, every single time. Here's where it gets extraordinary. The Ptolemaic dynasty collapsed. Egypt was absorbed into Rome. The rulers who stamped their faces on those coins were dead, dethroned, and forgotten. But merchants from Alexandria to Antioch kept accepting the coin. Not because a government backed it, because generations of trade had backed it. The trust wasn't in the issuer. The trust was in the metal, in the consistency, in the track record. Sound familiar? Now fast forward roughly 1,500 years. The Byzantine Empire, the longest surviving empire in human history, minted a gold coin called the Byzant. For over 700 years, it maintained the same gold content. Not approximately the same, exactly the same. Kings trusted it, merchants trusted it. Even Islamic traders who were technically at war with the Byzantine Empire trusted it and refused to stop using it. Then Constantinople fell in 1453, the empire that had existed for over a millennium, gone in a single day. And yet records show the Byzant continuing to circulate across trade routes for decades afterward. Think about what that means. The army was disbanded, the emperor was dead, the palace was burning, and somewhere in a bazaar in what is now Turkey, a merchant was still accepting a coin stamped with the face of a dead empire. Because real monetary trust is not built by governments, it is built by consistency over time. And that distinction between trust in a government and trust in a system is the most important concept you will ever understand. But the third currency on our list takes this to a completely different level, because this one didn't just outlast its government, it outlasted an entire civilization. Most people assume that when a civilization collapses, everything it built becomes worthless. That assumption has been proven catastrophically wrong. The third currency is the Maria Theresa Thaler, minted by the Habsburg Empire of Austria beginning in 1741. Maria Theresa was the Empress of Austria, powerful, methodical, and obsessed with one thing above all else: the consistency of her silver coin. Every thaler was minted to exact specifications, exact weight, exact silver content, exact design. No variation, no debasement, no shortcuts. And the Arabian Peninsula took notice. Merchants along the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden began demanding the Maria Theresa thaler specifically, not other silver coins, this one, because they had learned through painful experience with other currencies that this coin never lied about what it was. Then the Habsburg Empire began to fracture. World War I dismantled it entirely. Austria-Hungary ceased to exist as a political entity in 1918. But in Yemen, in Oman, in Ethiopia, in the souks of Aden, the Maria Theresa thaler kept circulating for decades after the empire was gone. In fact, and this is the detail that should genuinely stop you in your tracks, the Maria Theresa thaler is still being minted today by the Austrian Mint because demand never fully stopped. A coin that outlasted its empire by over a century, still in production, still trusted. Now the fourth currency breaks every rule even further. The Spanish dollar, the famous piece of 8, became the world's first truly global currency in the 1500s. Spanish galleons carried it from Mexico to Manila, from Seville to Shanghai. Then Spain's colonial empire collapsed, slowly, painfully, over more than a century of wars, revolutions, and bankruptcies. But the Spanish dollar didn't collapse with it. The newly independent United States, with no stable currency of its own, officially recognized the Spanish dollar as legal tender. It remained legal tender in the United States until 1857. Let that sink in. The currency of a collapsed empire was legally accepted money in America for over 50 years after that empire had effectively ceased to exist as a global power. And the fifth currency on our list? It doesn't just outlast a government, it outlasts the idea of government itself. There's a city in Central Europe that has changed hands so many times that its residents have lived under 5 different governments without ever moving. And through every single transition, every invasion, every liberation, every regime change, one thing stayed constant. The community kept trading. The community kept surviving, and the community kept using whatever currency they decided to trust, regardless of what any government told them. This brings us to the fifth forgotten currency, and the most important one. It doesn't have a single name. It has dozens. During World War II, across occupied Europe, official currencies were manipulated, devalued, and weaponized by occupying powers. The Nazi regime systematically drained value from the currencies of every country it controlled. So, ordinary people stopped using official money. And they replaced it with cigarettes. Not metaphorically, literally. Cigarettes became a standardized, widely accepted medium of exchange in prisoner of war camps, in occupied cities, in post-war Germany. A specific brand, a consistent product, a known quantity. By 1945 in Berlin, cigarettes were more stable and more trusted than the Reichsmark, the official currency of one of the most militarily powerful governments in modern history, less trusted than tobacco. The government had debased its currency through war spending and propaganda. The people responded by creating their own monetary system from scratch. And here is the pattern that connects all 5 currencies across all 5 centuries. Every single one of them shared 3 characteristics. First, consistency. The currency delivered exactly what it promised every single time. Same weight, same quality, same value, no surprises. Second, scarcity. None of these currencies could be printed infinitely. Silver and gold had natural limits. Cigarettes in a POW camp had supply constraints. The scarcity was real and verifiable. Third, Community consensus. The trust didn't come from a government decree, it came from repeated transactions between real people who chose, voluntarily, to accept the currency because it worked. Now, ask yourself a brutal question. How many of those three characteristics describe your current national currency? Because right now, across the world, central banks are printing money at rates that would have been considered catastrophic just 15 years ago. The U.S. money supply has more than doubled since 2020. The scarcity is gone, the consistency is gone, and the community consensus? That's the one they're most desperately trying to hold together. Which brings us to the final question, the one this entire video has been building toward. When the currencies of today follow the path of the empires of yesterday, what will the next forgotten currency be? And are you positioned to be holding it? Every currency we covered today was dismissed by experts before it outlasted its government. Every single one. The scholars of Rome didn't predict that a Greek silver coin would keep circulating after their empire absorbed Egypt. The economists of 1918 didn't predict that a defunct empire's coin would still be minted 100 years later. The generals of World War II didn't predict that cigarettes would outcompete the Reichsmark. History doesn't announce itself, it arrives quietly, and by the time most people realize what's happening, the transition is already over. So here is what the pattern of these 5 forgotten currencies is telling us about right now. First observation, the assets that survived government collapse were always tangible or verifiable. Silver, gold, tobacco, things you could hold, weigh, and test without trusting anyone's promise. What is the modern equivalent? Hard assets, precious metals, productive land, and, controversially but importantly, certain cryptocurrencies whose supply is mathematically fixed and publicly verifiable. Bitcoin's 21 million coin limit is the closest thing the modern world has produced to the consistent silver content of a Maria Theresa Thaler. Second observation. The communities that survived currency collapse were never the wealthiest. They were the most prepared and most connected. The merchant in 15th century Oman who kept accepting the bezant wasn't doing it out of sentimentality. He was doing it because he understood value independently of government narrative. The prisoner in a 1945 German camp who stockpiled cigarettes wasn't lucky. He understood that in a crisis, the currency that wins is the one that solves real problems for real people. Third observation, every currency collapse in history was preceded by the same warning signs: accelerating money printing, government debt that outgrew any realistic ability to repay, public confidence quietly eroding while official statements remained optimistic. Does any of that sound familiar? Here is the final thought. You don't need to believe that collapse is imminent to take these lessons seriously. You just need to believe, as every financial historian already does, that systems that have failed repeatedly throughout history are not magically immune from failing again. The Ptolemaic dynasty thought their power was permanent. The Habsburg Empire thought their reach was permanent. The Weimar Republic thought their recovery was permanent. They were all wrong. The currencies that outlasted them shared one thing in common. They were trusted by ordinary people making rational decisions, not by governments making promises. The question is not whether the next forgotten currency will exist. It already does. The question is whether you'll recognize it before or after the government that's printing your money is gone. Subscribe, share this with one person who needs to hear it, and if you want to understand exactly how ordinary families protected their wealth through the 5 biggest economic collapses of the last century, that video is next. History is the only financial advisor that has never been wrong.